Alright, so if you use your calculator, right, your table that you're supposed to get is that. That's the table, right? This table, you then plot the points, the critical points. These are the critical points. Okay? And where do you get those critical points? So this is not a critical point, but that one is. Right? You get them from the calculator. Right? And the equation for this graph it's y equal to minus 2 sine 2x.
Must you indicate that?
Yes, you have to label your graph. Okay? Then let's write down the properties. So amplitude, it is in a positive value, it's a distance. It is the height of a crest, this height here, or the depth of a shaft, which is that. Okay? Amplitude is the height of a crest or the depth of a trough. You can also use this formula. Amplitude is equal to y max minus y minimum all over 2. Your y max is the value of y here at the maximum turning point there, and that value is a 2. So we put 2 here minus. The y minimum is the value of y here, which is a negative 2. So we put negative 2. Divide that by 2, and you get 4 over 2. Your final answer will be a 2. Okay, if you don't want to do a calculation, you just take the positive value of this negative coefficient of sine 2x. You take the positive of the coefficient of sine 2x because amplitude is always positive. Okay, then we can have many questions on this graph. Okay, for now, I'm not going to talk about interpretation as yet. Okay, there are questions on interpretation that can come up from this graph. All right, so we have amplitude that's equal to 2. The period is equal to 360 degrees over b, which is 360 degrees over 2, and the final answer will be 180 degrees. You can even see that on the graph. Okay? This is a full sine graph, either from here to there. Okay? I'm going to repeat. There are 2 ways you can get the answer from the graph. You might not need to do a calculation to get the period if the graph is drawn. So from here, that's minus 92. That point there, where you've got 90 degrees. So if you want to get that length in degrees, it will be 90 degrees. So I can write here, period is equal to 90 degrees minus 90 degrees. Then you get 108 degrees, which is the same answer here. Okay? You can also get it. Yes? For what? The general formula for calculating the period is this. Okay, generally, for this one now, I would say it will be maximum endpoint minus minimum endpoint. But that the endpoints are referring to 2 points such that after those 2 points, the graph will start to repeat itself.
So for example, how that you use the asymptote.
Yes. You have to look at the asymptotes. Because remember, the period of a tan graph is the length in degrees between the asymptotes. That's an easier definition. Right? So here, maximum endpoint minus minimum endpoint. Okay? Also, you can choose this point here as your minimum and this one here as your what? Your maximum. I hope you can see that the graph will start to repeat itself. So we have half of the graph, then the second half. So it's a full sine here. Therefore, this is the maximum value of the end point, and that's the minimum. So we end up having 180 degrees minus 0 degrees. You get what? 180 degrees. Let me warn you, you have to understand the graphs. Okay? They are only taught in grade 11, but they are assessed in metric. We don't teach the graphs in metric, but they will come when you write metric, they will be there. Yes? Generally, the sketching, 3 marks. Generally, because you can use the table, you can use your calculator to do a table. The graphs, I would say, in average of about 10 marks. It can be more. Okay? I'm talking about doing a proper maths paper.
I'm saying that
Huh?
functions like trig functions.
Yes, I'm talking about trig functions only. The trig functions only. About 10 marks. Right. Right. Then let's talk about the domain. Now the domain, it's already given. We are sketching the graph from minus 90 degrees to 180 degrees. Okay? To 180 degrees. Yes.
I have a question. Remember when you go playing the state inside for period that only is the amplitude now. So the amplitude is
No, don't confuse amplitude. You cannot get the amplitude directly from an equation, but you can use the coefficient of the sine. There's a difference here. You see here, minus 2 is the coefficient of sine x. 2 is the coefficient of x. There's a difference there. Which one would use to find the amplitude is the coefficient of sine 2x, not the coefficient of x. You use the coefficient of x to find the period. This one, okay, let me just indicate for you. This one here is used to determine the amplitude. And this one here to determine the period.
so if it was just minus the
If it was minus sine x.
for the period calculation,
Yes. But for amplitude, it will remain 2. All right. Then, but we have got another question. Okay, if you don't have another question, then let me carry on now with this. So we are now in the range. The range. The range. Yes. You still have to talk about horizontal shift. Right? The range, our minimum value of y is here at the minimum turning point. That's negative 2. Our maximum value of y is here. That's positive 2. So that will be your range. All right, now I'm going to ask you an extra question now. If, say, you were asked this question here, will you try to determine the answer? And I'll say, for what values of x, for what values of x, okay, for what values of x, okay, in this case, the name of our graph is y. So for what values of x will y equal to minus, okay, I'll say, for what values of x will y be greater, let me say, y be less than 0. For what values of x will y be less than 0? For what values will this graph, for what values of x will this graph have negative values of y?
0.25.
It's not one value.
0.25.
It's not one value or two values. It's an interval.
0.45.
No.
No, 0.90 and 0.
So it's 0 and what? And 90.
Sorry, you should know I said.
Okay? Because I was getting many answers. Right? So between 0 degrees and 90 degrees, the y values are below the x-axis, which means the y values are negative. So what values will satisfy that? Your answer there will be 0 degrees is less than x is less than 90 degrees.
But sir, that answer is not completely correct.
It is.
Because you see, yeah, because at 90 degrees, y is 0.
Yes, but here is there an equal sign here?
But you said it is must be less.
You have done inequalities. You know what this means. Y is less than 0. It means the 0 is not included.
Maybe it must be 80, 90.
Listen, you did no. You did. You did inequalities last year. You did inequalities this year. If I put here an equal sign, then you would also put an equal sign here, an equal sign there.
That means less than equal.
Yes, but here I'm talking about less than 0, which means the y values are negative. The y values are negative as long as y is 0,000, maybe 001 or 00009. The smallest value, which is as close as possible to 0, is less than 0. Okay? So that will be the solution. Let me warn you, if you write another answer for a question like this, you get 0. Alright, let's move on to the next graph. Now that I have shown you how to use the calculator, is there anybody who has got any issue with that? Right, so the second homework was this. You're supposed to get that. If you did the question, you're supposed to get that. So the equation for this graph is y equal to a half cos 2x. Y equal to, okay. Let me show you how to put that in the calculator. And number 7. So we're saying f of x equal to a half 1 over 2, right? Times, okay, cos 2x, so that will be 2 alpha x, 2 alpha x. When you close the bracket, yes. Yeah, for this graph, the period is 180. Alright, so that's how we're supposed to put the equation. Then you press equals to ask for g of x, you put 0. Then where are we starting? From minus 90 again, minus 90. And then we are stopping at 180 degrees from 180. Our step is called the period over 4. The period is exactly as this one. So it's 45. Our step is 45 degrees. right? And then you get your table there. That's your table with your x and your y values. Remember, we are only using column 1 and column 2. We don't need column 3, right? Okay. Any question? Okay, you don't have a question then. So that's what you're supposed to have. The amplitude is just the coefficient of cos 2x, this value here. Okay? It is also this height or that height. It is also equal to, okay, I don't want to put it here. Yeah. Let's use those 2 points, right? It's either the height of the crest or the depth of the trough. Okay? And the answer will be a half. The period, you can get it from the graph by saying the maximum endpoint minus the minimum endpoint. Or you can just use the formula y max minus y minimum all over 2. So for this question, it's also 108 degrees. If you practice a lot, you realize that some of the answers, as soon as you see the graph, you know the answer. So the moment you see cos 2x and you ask, well, what's the period? You don't have to do any calculation, no stress, answer is 180 degrees. Okay? Then the domain is the same as the previous question. So x is an element. We are starting from minus 90 degrees, so up to 180 degrees. The range, our minimum is minus a half. So y is an element. We're starting from minus a half to positive a half. Yes.
So if you put some of the decimal point, right?
0.5 and minus 0.5. Well, it's fine. But it's not necessary though. But it's still correct. Right? We can also have questions here. Decreasing. For what? Okay, let's answer this question. For what value of x, okay, is, let's say, for what values of x is y referring to that graph, y equal to a half of cos x increasing, or what let's say an increasing function. What values of x is y equal to an increasing function? The answer cannot be one value. So what values of x is y equal to half cos x an increasing function. Remember, if it's an increasing function, the gradient must be positive. So, as the y values increase, the x values are also increasing. Both the x and y values are increasing.
Negative 90 to 0 and 85 to
Negative 90 to 0, yes. And then 135 to 180.
So 90 to 180.
90 to 108, so I think from here up to the end. Yes. So we have two intervals. Okay? We have two intervals such that that graph is an increasing function. So your two answers, when you write them like this. Minus 90 degrees is less than x, and x is less than 0 degrees. Or, that's the first interval. From here up to there, the graph, between those 2 points, the graph is an increasing function, which means the values of x are increasing as the y values are also increasing. Then the graph will start to be a decreasing function, decreasing until you get to this point, then it starts to increase to the right. So we have 90 degrees is less than x, x is less than 180 degrees. Those will be your two answers. Okay, I've started what's called interpretation. Right? Later we are going to have to sketch two graphs on the same system of axes, and then we do further analysis of that. Okay. Then the last question. The last question. The last question. You're supposed to get a graph like this. It's not a straight line. Not a straight line. You have to use freehand to sketch this. Okay? You have to use freehand. So the equation for this graph is y equal to sine 1 over 3x plus 1. This plus 1, it represents vertical shift. Okay? It represents vertical shift. Okay, wait. Wait. Alright. So, listen. So, if you sketched it, you're supposed to get something like this. Okay? Did you get that? Alright. So, the equation y equal to sine 1 over 3x plus 1. Can you stop talking, please, and do me a favor? I need to carry on now. Right? Amplitude. The amplitude here is the coefficient of sine a third x, which is going to be a 1. Or you can use the formula. If you think you can get confused, then you can use the what? The formula. It is also from here, since we have got an x-intercept here, and here the graph is at the same level. This is the equilibrium position. That's the equilibrium line. And this height here, that's your amplitude, that height. And that height is going to be 1 unit. The period is going to be 360 degrees over 1 over 3. And the final answer will be 1080. So this is a full sine graph. From here all the way up to there. It's a full sine graph. That's the sine graph. So period is 1080. The domain, if x is an element, we are starting from 0 degrees up to 1080 degrees. The range, okay, the range is going to be y is an element, and the minimum value of y is here. It's a 0. The maximum is a 2. Yes. No.
Max minus.
If you use the formula y max minus y minimum over 2, you get a 1. Also, you can identify the equilibrium line. This is the one which I have drawn here in red. The distance between the maximum turning point and the equilibrium line is your amplitude. Right? Or you can say the height of the crest, depth of the trough. If you think you can get confused there, then use the formula. Y max, this formula here, you never go wrong. Minus y minimum all over 2. You will never make a mistake with this formula. And that's the best way that I would suggest that you determine your amplitude. Use this formula and you never go wrong. Any other method which I told you about requires a greater depth of understanding of the graphs. Okay? But you can also get it from the equation. The coefficient of sine a third x. That coefficient of sine a third x is the amplitude. So we are going to have 0, and the maximum is a 2. Now check this. For your amplitude, it will be 2 minus 0 over 2. That will give you 1. Okay? So that's what you are supposed to have done.